My name is Jacob. I live here in San Diego, California, and I was recently called to be the Gospel Principles teacher in my local Mormon congregation. And I thought it might be fun to create some podcasts out of the lessons that I prepare for those who might be interested in some of the fundamentals of Mormon doctrine. So today I'll be talking a little bit about the family and how the family can be eternal. It's chapter 36 in the Gospel Principles Manual, for those who have a copy of the manual. My presentation today, for those who are watching the PowerPoint, will have some Korean words in it. We have a Korean fellow who's visiting our congregation, not yet a member of the church, but is perhaps considering joining. I don't know the details. At any rate, I thought I'd include some Korean words to help him. So if you don't speak Korean, feel free to ignore that portion of the presentation. All right, so as I mentioned, the topic today is the family. I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the first family. I'm not talking about the first earthly family, but the family from which we came. So before we were born here on the earth, we lived with our Heavenly Father. In Mormonism especially, as well as some other Christian religions, there's great emphasis placed on the fact that God is our Father. He's not some abstract being, but He's very real in our lives. He's a personal God, and we are His children. And so by the same logic, thinking in terms of this first family, well, then everyone on earth is our brothers and sisters. And I spent several years in Brazil, 2 years in Brazil as a Mormon missionary, and I recall that in the beginning there were a number of cultural differences. But as time came on, as I came to know that wonderful people, I began to see them truly as brothers and sisters in this theological sense. We're all children of God. And that idea of us all being children of God truly gives a great perspective in the way we treat others. Those people in Brazil, despite cultural differences, I truly came to love them as my brothers and sisters. And this idea that we both have the same Heavenly Father was a very powerful idea in my own life. So, having come from a celestial family prior to earth, we were sent to earth, and God wanted to create families on earth to mimic what was in heaven. So He created the first family, which was Adam and Eve. God married them, joined them as one. And one of the reasons God wanted to create families here on earth is because He wanted to provide us with physical bodies. Now this is an interesting difference between Mormon Christianity and most other branches of Christianity. And that is that gods believe in a corporeal deity. We believe in a God that has a physical body. Again, we stray from this idea that God is some sort of abstract being, that he's not concrete, not real, not personal. We believe He's a physical being, although with the physicality far more glorious than anything we could ever imagine, and that our bodies are a gift from Him, that He sent us to earth with the purpose of gaining a body so that we could in turn understand His existence better, and so that eventually we could become more like Him. So one of the main reasons we have a family is so that we can come to earth and that we can receive a physical body. So in Mormonism, parents are seen as partners with God. God is the Heavenly Father. Parents are the earthly fathers and mothers, and they really work on a team together. The ideal Mormon parents would not feel that they're alone in raising their children. They would see these children as a gift from God, beings that recently came from God's presence, and they would then want to work with God to try to raise these children and to try to help them eventually return to the Heavenly Father. So along these lines, along this idea of trying to work with God, parents should teach their children a few key things. First of all, if the parents have the knowledge about Heavenly Father, if they know of God's plan, they have a very sacred responsibility to teach their children of that plan. It's kind of unfair to be in a partnership and to never even mention your partner. God is the partner of all parents, and so parents have a responsibility to include God in their lives and in their children's lives by teaching their children about God. Second, it's very important for parents to teach their children how to pray to God. That communication between human beings and God is critical in Mormonism, as it is in much of Christianity. And that's a very important skill that all parents need to teach. They need to teach them to have faith. And they need to teach them godly virtues like having self-control, loyalty, hard work, and kindness. As I think over my own childhood, the things that my parents taught me, so many wonderful, important principles. So often those principles were taught by example more than words. I remember one experience. I went and visited my dad at work. My dad is a judge back in Utah, and he'd often have people who were addicted to various drugs come before him. And I remember passing one of these people as I was going into the courtroom. His brain seemed so fried from drugs that he didn't even seem fully conscious. He was rather slovenly, unshaven. And I went in and I saw my dad dealing with this fellow's case, and despite the fact that this fellow had basically ruined his life, my dad treated him as if he were a visiting dignitary. He treated him with the same respect he would have treated a visiting dignitary. And that's a very important lesson that I learned from my father, a godly virtue that I learned from my father. Every human being has equal value before God, and that they all need to be treated respectfully. And so as families and as parents, we need to try to teach our children these important virtues. Now, one day, inevitably, death will arrive. It's perhaps the only certainty in mortality. And we will all die, and will return to the Heavenly Father. And the important question then is, will our families on earth survive this death? Will we continue to function as families in the next life? Will our wives still be our wives? Will our husbands still be our husbands? Will our children still be our children? And this is particularly poignant to me because my grandfather recently died. It's a very important question. I loved my grandfather very much, and he's left now. Will I ever see him again? And even if I do see him again, will he still be my grandfather? Will our familial relationship be maintained in the next life? And Mormons emphatically say yes, families can be eternal. In Mormonism, there's a sacred ordinance performed in our holy temples called a sealing, by which families can be joined together so that the family unit will survive even death. So that in the next life we'll not only be families in the sense that we'll all have the same Heavenly Father and we'll be brothers and sisters, but even the structure of our earthly families will be maintained. And our children will still be our children, our spouses will still be our spouses. This Mormon belief was very evident in my life, again with the passing of my grandfather recently. It was really interesting as he was passing on to see my aunts and uncles all gathered around his bed. And there was much sadness. We're definitely going to miss him. But there was no tragedy, because we know we'll see him again, and that beyond that, he will still be our grandfather in the next life, and that we'll still enjoy the same familial relationships that we enjoyed in life. I'm very grateful for my own marriage. My wife and I were married 5 years ago or so in the Salt Lake. I say or so. My wife could probably tell you down to the month, but I'm not quite as observant as she is. We were married in the Salt Lake City Temple. And beyond just being married, we also participated in the sealing ordinance so that our marriage and our family will survive death. And I'm very grateful for this beautiful ordinance. As I mentioned, this sealing occurs in the temple. This is an example. It's actually from a museum in Salt Lake City of more or less what it looks like inside a sealing room, if you'll just ignore the museum instructions and things. This is called the altar, so that the husband and the wife will sit across from this altar, will join hands as the officiator proceeds with the ceremony. Truly, it's just a beautiful ceremony. One of the interesting symbolisms in this sealing room is that they have two large mirrors on opposite sides of the room, so that the light will bounce back and forth between the mirrors. And if you look into one mirror, it's like you're looking off into eternity, and that's to represent the eternal posterity, your children, your grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren on one side, and then on the other side of the room, your father, your grandfather, your great-great-grandfather. And the idea is that all of these generations, from the very beginning of humanity to its very end, will all be sealed together in this familial relationship in the next life. And there's also a temple here in San Diego, where I live. It's actually just a few minutes from my house, and of particular interest to our South Korean visitor.